Our next essential question is, how do I divide with decimal divisors? Now, before we get into decimal divisors, take a look at tables 1, 2, and 3 here. This is not in your workbook, so don't worry about looking for it. Do you see a pattern in each table below? Use mental arithmetic to find each quotient. But you know what? If you want to use a calculator for these couple problems, you can do that, because you're going to notice a very interesting pattern here. 54 divided by 6, well, if you know your math facts, you know that that's 9. This problem looks very similar. 540 divided by 60. Guess what? That's also 9, because think of the zeros as canceling out. Same thing here. 5,400 divided by 600, still 9. These two zeros cancel out those two zeros. And you can check it on a calculator if you don't believe me. So what do you think is going to happen in table 2? 35 divided by 5 is 7. 350 divided by 50, 7. 3,500 divided by 500, still 7. Interesting, huh? I bet you can figure out what's going to happen here in table 3. All of them are going to end up being 5. Well, what's the reasoning behind this? And I'm going to tell you what that is. Take a look underneath here. The patterns in the tables above were created by multiplying the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10. In each pattern, the quotient remains the same. Thus, multiplying both the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10 maintains the equality of the expression. Meaning, if you multiply the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10, it really doesn't change the problem. You're going to get the same quotient either way. So what happened was here, 6 times 10 gave us 60, and 54 times 10 gave us 540. So we multiplied both the divisor and the dividend by 10, and we ended up with 540 divided by 60, which still ended up giving us the same quotient. What if we do 6 times 100 and 54 times 100? Now we have 5,400 divided by 600. And even though we multiplied both the divisor and dividend by a power of 10, we still got the same quotient of 9. And you can see that pattern in table 2 and in table 3. If you're multiplying by a power of 10, and just to remind you, powers of 10 are 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, you get the idea. Okay? By multiplying the divisor and the dividend by a power of 10, you're really not changing the problem. You're going to get the same quotient. So what does that have to do with our essential question? Here you can see, and this is workbook pages 91 and 92, we have a couple different problems where we have decimals in our divisor. So the number outside of the den, the divisor, has decimal points involved. What we can do is we can multiply the divisor by a power of 10 and multiply the dividend by that same power of 10. And watch what happens. So let's see, if I want to do 3/10 times 10, I'm going to end up with 3. And 9 times 10 is going to give me 90. Basically, we just turned 9 divided by 3/10 into 90 divided by 3. I multiplied both the divisor and dividend by the same power of 10, and even though the problem looks different, I know I'm supposed to get the same quotient, just like I did on the last page. 90 divided by 3 gives you 30. Another way to look at it, if you look at the bottom, you basically are moving the decimal in the divisor to the right until the divisor is a whole number. I multiplied by 10 because I knew that would give me a whole number of 3. Then I moved the decimal point in the dividend to the right the same number of times. So, just to show you what that looks like, if I take this decimal point and move it once to the right, I now have 3. If I take the decimal point in the wait a minute, where is the decimal point in the 9? Oh, that's right, 9's a whole number, so I know the decimal point is to the right of it. I just don't always write it in, but I know it's there. I move that to the right. I might have to put a little 0 in there so I have something for the decimal point to kind of scoop around. And now I have 90. There's that problem. Let's take a look at number 9 now. Let's erase some of this so we have some space. Okay. What if we took the 5/10 and times that by 10? That would give me 5. And if I took the 100 and times it by 10, that would give me, oh, sorry, right, my fault. 100 times 10 would give me 1,000. So basically it's 1,000 divided by 5. Or, again, if you want to think of it in terms of moving the decimal point, move the decimal point once to the right to make that a whole number 5. Then I have to move the decimal point in the dividend once to the right. Remember, every whole number has a decimal point to the right of it. We just don't always write it in. So I can move it once to the right and add a 0 in. There's my 1,000. So 5 goes into 1,000 200 times. Let's look at number 17. Let's see, here I've got 1/100th in the divisor, so maybe I'll multiply this by 100. So, oops, that's supposed to be a 100. 1/100th times 100 is going to give me 1. And 40 times 100 is going to give me 4,000. So basically I'm doing 4,000 divided by 1, which obviously is 4,000. Again, if you want to think in terms of moving the decimal point, move the decimal point once, twice here to make that a whole number 1, and move the decimal point once, twice in the dividend to make that 4,000. Alright, let's look at the 21. Again, I think I'm going to multiply by 100 this time. So 3 21/100ths times 100 is going to give me 321. And if I do 6 and 42 hundredths times 100, once again I'm going to end up with 642. Or if you want to think of it in terms of moving the decimal point, move the decimal point once, twice to the right, making it 321, once, twice to the right, making that 642. And 642 divided by 321 is going to give me 2. Alright, so here are the takeaways. When you have a decimal point in your divisor, either, multiply by a power 10 or simply just think, okay, move the decimal point in the divisor to the right until it's a whole number. So here I have 8 4/10. It would help if I moved it over once and I would make it 84. Then if I move the decimal point once in the divisor, I have to do the same thing in the dividend. So move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of times. The dividend does not need to be a whole number, only the divisor, so keep that in mind. The dividend does not need to be a whole number. And then divide like you normally would. Be sure to move the decimal point in the dividend straight into the quotient. So here is my decimal point, and I move it straight up so that it is between the 0 and the 3 there. So 31 hundredths would be the answer in the sample problem.